welcome to In Our Honest Opinion. For those that do not know, this is Adam, and I am introducing our final compilation episode of 31 Nights of Frights, so this would be Week 4. Sadly, we did not get to record a new episode for you guys. However, it's not all bad because we're actually running our contest right now, and you can get yourself a 31 Nights of Frights t-shirt, and all you need to do is just post up the two code words on our Instagram post. So, the second code word is going to be apparition. I'm going to repeat that one more time. It's apparition. Just as a reminder, you can find the first code word in night number 30 and 31 of In Our Honest Opinion Sidetracked 31 Nights of Frights. Our little contest here is a thank you for listening to our first holiday special, first seasonal special, whatever you would like to call it. But we definitely greatly appreciate you listening. It's been a challenge and an undertaking. However, it's been a lot of fun to bring these episodes to you guys. It's one of these things. I didn't realize how much I was going to love doing this for you guys. I was pretty much out there doing this every day. I was recording an episode every day. I wasn't actually queuing them up or anything like that. So it was definitely a fun thing to do for me. And I hope you guys really, really enjoyed listening to them. So whether you join me daily or whether you join me weekly, just thank you. Remember, our Instagram post for the giveaway is going up if it's not up already. So check out our Instagram, In Our Honest Opinion, and just post up the code words and you can win that t-shirt. And honestly, I think I talked enough here, and I think you guys probably want to get going with the episode. So, without any further talking from me, please enjoy the episode. And here is week number 4 of 31 Nights of Frights, presented by In Our Honest Opinion. Hello and welcome to night 22 of 31 Nights of Frights, presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen, this is Bernard Rose's 1992 certified classic, Candyman. Based on Clive Barker's short story titled The Forbidden, Candyman is an urban legend tale about a murderous boogeyman who accidentally is brought to life by a skeptic grad student who is researching the myth of Candyman. Oh yeah, he actually kills with a hook for a hand and has bees in his mouth. Okay, so the first thing I think I should state about Candyman, I think this is quite possibly one of the greatest horror films ever made. It's a very classically styled horror film. It's one of those that sticks with you, and we're given a strong central villain with Tony Todd as Candyman. He is simply amazing in this role. And it's actually good too, because director Bernard Rose, I believe he kind of tapped into the one thing that I really like about Clive Barker, and that is establishing a powerful as well as a sympathetic villain. And we definitely get that here. Tony Todd, enough cannot be said about his performance here. Sadly, Tony Todd did not really get the chance to be in a whole lot of, I guess, good movies. He was in the Final Destination series. He was in the Tom Savini directed 1990 Night of the Living Dead. But yes, Tony Todd, after seeing this movie, I'm pretty sure you guys will be fans of his work as well. I think one of the best things about the Candyman movie here is the fact that it was adapted from a Clive Barker story. However, it was never established that it was a urban setting. As far as I know, the original story actually had it set in an England town, and instead they changed things around a little bit, and I think it worked really well. I can see how Virginia Madsen's character kind of gets seduced by Candyman. It's a very twisted love story in a way, but I kind of look at Clive Barker's other movies to have sort of a romanticism to them as well. Candyman definitely fits in well with other Clive Barker movies and stories, such as Hellraiser, also known as The Hellbound Heart, which is the title of the book. And then also later, which was not a Clive Barker directed movie, but Midnight Meat Train. It's one of those where it all kind of feels like it's all in the same world, and it's awesome that these various directors are able to actually tap into what makes a Clive Barker story great. One of the most interesting things about Candyman himself is the fact that he's an urban legend that is brought to life by saying his name 5 times in a dark room while looking at a mirror. Supposedly, after you say his name the 5th time, he appears behind you. However, he only appears if you actually believe in him. Because he's an urban legend, he needs to be brought to life by actual belief in him. And I think that's one of the things that makes it great. Yes, it's similar to a Bloody Mary type of idea, but it kind of goes and it repurposes it for its own idea. And I think it works out great here. It's one of those that you wouldn't think that it would work, or if you could actually make an entire movie based off of it. However, it's just something that seems to work well. It seems like everything in this movie fell into place nicely. Keep an eye out in this movie for Ted Raimi, who is actually brother of Sam Raimi. And when the original Candyman story is being told to Virginia Madsen in the movie, he's actually in the scene as far as the story itself. It's kind of a cool little cameo. He's been in tons of other things, including another Clive Barker adaptation, Midnight Meat Train. Another actor that I thought it was funny is in this movie, and that is Xander Berkeley. He's been in tons of things. It seems like there's always a movie with him in. He was actually in Terminator 2 as John Connor as his foster father. And also, he's currently in The Walking Dead. So, kind of cool to see him show up here in Candyman. Not something that I remember, however, going back to watch it. It was just fun to see little things that I didn't notice before. One last thing I'm going to say about this movie. The bees. Candyman, the story of him himself. He was a slave that was caught sleeping with the plantation owner, I believe his wife or his daughter, I forget which. And they killed him. They cut off his hand, they put honey on him, had bees sting him to death. Tony Todd in this movie, he has bees in his mouth. Yes, there were really bees in his mouth throughout this film. You don't see it too often, but when you do see it, it is kind of shocking, and I cannot imagine even doing something like that. So, if I wasn't already praising Tony Todd before, I'm going to praise him again. He really does play the role well, and I honestly cannot see anybody else in this role. So I'm sure that this was intentional, but this movie also has a very gothic horror type of feel, in addition to the urban legend. Tony Todd, he reminds me of a very classically styled villain as well. So amongst all the blood and gore, you definitely have a very classically styled horror film as well. It's just one of the many things that makes this, as I put it, it's a certified classic. This is easily one of the best horror movies ever made. I highly recommend, if you have not seen it, please go check it out. If you really want to, check out the second movie, Candyman Farewell to the Flesh. That one was actually good. I'd probably skip Candyman 3, but that's me personally. Either way, none of those even touch this movie. But with that, I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, please check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 23 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Paul Le Mat and Irene Miracle, this is Charles Band's first full moon feature and director David Schmoller's 1992 cult classic, Puppet Master. Puppet Master tells the story of psychics that are brought together by the death of a fellow psychic, and they just so happen to stumble upon some murderous puppets. So I'm going to start this one off and say that I actually enjoy this series, not so much for the movies and the stories themselves, but I think I actually just like the puppets. The puppets are cool. They have definite personalities about them, and every one is unique. And I think that's one of the things that kind of separates this from other horror films. You have your standard one. You have Blade. He's kind of the leader. I mean, it's just, they're cool. They're very cool to look at. And then the puppetry with them here, it's actually done really well for a movie that was made for about $1 million or so. The special effects are probably better than what you would expect. One of the puppets that is less believable, and if you can believe puppets that are walking and doing things by themselves, is probably Leech Woman. While it's a very unbelievable puppet, it's actually one that I think is really cool. She kind of spits out leeches in her mouth, and that's how she kills people. It's very unique, and the creativity on display in the first few Puppet Master films, it's very impressive. One thing about this movie is that it was actually set to go theatrically. As far as I know, it never played theatrically. And it's kind of interesting, the company that was going to release it, and that was Paramount. However, Charles Band wound up pulling out of the deal, and all of the videos that Full Moon has produced, all the films, they actually went direct to video from there on out. And it's funny too, because as far as I know, the original releases of a lot of Full Moon features still had the Paramount distribution on them. Getting back to the actual film though, I think it's well made for what it is. Director David Schmoller, which I may revisit in another 31 Nights of Frights this month. He came from directing the movie Tourist Trap, which is kind of an entertaining movie in itself. Well made, kind of crazy, and has a bit of a psychic slant, just like Puppet Master does. And I think the psychic slant on this movie, on Puppet Master, is probably one of the weakest aspects of the movie. Each of the psychics have their own abilities, such as Paul Le Mat, where he's able to see the future. Irene Miracle's character, she actually can see things that are not there. It's cool and it differentiates itself a little bit from other horror films, but I kind of wish they would have just gone with a straight ahead puppets are attacking them. However, the psychic slant is the main motivation here. So I'm going to say that I can't have my cake and eat it too with the movie. It's definitely not perfect, but it's a fun way to spend 90 minutes. So where did the puppets come from? They came from creator Andre Toulon, who actually got the spell from Egypt of all places. And you find out in later entries that he created the puppets as a source of income for him and then later used them as a source for his revenge. The character of Toulon was played by various actors later in the series. However, here we have actor William Hickey playing him, and I kind of like William Hickey. He's been in a whole bunch of things. He's been in Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. He has been in Tales from the Crypt episode. And then also he played Lewis in National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And he's just a fun older actor to watch in movies. He's only here for maybe 5 minutes, but it was cool to see him. Another neat cameo is at the very beginning with Barbara Crampton, who was also in Reanimator and was in a very infamous scene in Reanimator. Considering Charles Band was producer of Reanimator, I imagine that's why she is here, and it was just kind of fun to see her show up. One of the things that I really like about this movie is its love for the horror genre. This is primarily set in the Bodega Bay Inn, and Bodega Bay, if it does not ring a bell to a lot of people, this would be the setting for Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, as well as John Carpenter's The Fog. So it was actually cool to have that as a little reference. Sadly, the Puppet Master series kind of went downhill throughout the years. The first 3 were pretty good, and I'm going to be talking about the other 2, which I kind of consider a bit of a trilogy. Anything else that came beyond that was not all that great. It also received a remake, which I am also going to be talking about and giving my thoughts on. But with this one, with the first Puppet Master and the first 3 films in the series, I would recommend them just as a go in with somewhat lowered expectations and know you're getting more or less direct-to-video quality films. However, they're high-quality direct-to-video films, so it's not something that you're going to probably put on and say, oh man, that was one of the worst things I've ever seen. But there honestly is a lot of love here. There's a lot of love for the horror genre, and that's specified by the little references that they have, such as the Bodega Bay. And then also, it's just one of those where the puppets themselves are charming. It's very much a we love the horror genre, and I think it's a shame that Charles Moon, with his Full Moon Pictures, it never succeeded in what I feel it was intended to do. He's made a whole bunch of trashy films throughout his company and his career. They still make money, they still have their fans, but the budgets and stuff on the films just kind of dwindled by the end of it. So definitely check out this one. Go in with the proper expectations, and I think you'll have a good time with it. And with that, I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, give a listen to our In Our Honest Opinion podcast. We just finished up our Halloween episode, and that was talks on the various movies, the horror genre in general, and it was a lot of fun to produce. And I think if you're listening to the 31 Nights of Frights, or even if you listen to our podcast in general, I think you guys are going to have a good time and get a kick out of it. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 24 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Elizabeth McClellan, this is director David Allen's follow-up to Puppet Master 2. The movie starts with the puppets digging up the body of Andre Toulon, who is killed in the first movie. He's shot by some Nazis that found him. So the puppets are digging him up, and they give him some magical brain fluid, and wouldn't you know it, Andre Toulon and his puppets are back. But that's not all. You actually have some paranormal investigators that are investigating the murder of Megan Gallagher, who was in the first film. The hero of the first film, Alex, is locked away. You have flashbacks of Andre Toulon and his wife purchasing eternal life recipe from Egypt. There is a lot of stuff going on in this movie. Let's see if we can sort it out a little bit. So this is probably one of the crazier sequels out there to any film in any franchise. It's not to say that it's bad, but man, there is so much going on. That's only a little bit of the plot there that I was saying. I think one of the more interesting aspects of this movie is the eternal life slant. Gone is the psychic slant, which I kind of complained about a little bit in the first Puppet Master film. It wasn't bad, but it was something I could have done without. So they got rid of that and they replaced it with a whole bunch more crazy stuff going on. I mean, honestly, the big plot point of this film is Andre Toulon trying to bring back his wife, and he sees his wife in paranormal investigator Carolyn. Forgive me for the little misstep there. There is a Carolyn and a Camille, and I'm trying not to get the two confused on this. So Toulon sees his wife in Carolyn, and his whole goal in this movie is to transfer his soul from his reanimated corpse into a dummy, more or less, and take Carolyn's soul and transport that into another kind of giant doll. So it's a weird movie. It's extremely strange. I would say the acting is probably a little bit better than the first one. This is probably, again, another well-made direct-to-video movie from Full Moon. This is before they kind of went into being a really crappy company. So we still have a little bit of a semblance of quality. I believe the budget is a little smaller on this one, but it doesn't really detract at all. It still takes place in the Bodega Bay Inn, which I thought that was cool to revisit exactly the same place of the first film. And again, the puppetry is really, really well done here. The stop motion effects on the puppets themselves, I think, is incredibly cool. It still impresses me here what they were able to do. It's funny because the new Puppet Master film, The Littlest Reich, the puppets aren't nearly as neat in that one as what they are here in these first three Puppet Master films. If anything, I would say the stop motion animation and puppetry of these puppets looks even better here than the first movie. A lot of the flashback stuff that is shown with Toulon and his wife is actually pretty interesting. That's where I said about in the first episode for the original Puppet Master film, there is the whole Egypt subplot, and I think it's a very interesting idea. I like the flashback stuff they show here. It kind of strengthens the story a little bit from the first one, and it makes a pretty good, if you watch it back to back, it's actually not a bad way to spend about 3 hours. The puppets, for some reason, take liking to Camille, because at the very end of the movie, which is kind of weird, but Toulon fails with trying to transfer souls into these giant doll-like looking things. The puppets themselves seem to go and take a liking to the character of Camille, who's actually killed off kind of early in the movie, and they wind up taking her soul and putting it into that doll that was meant for Carolyn, and it looks like she winds up more or less becoming the new Toulon or puppet master. And that's actually where the story kind of ends. But I think one of the more interesting aspects about this is director David Schmoller, who directed the first Puppet Master film, directed a movie called Tourist Trap. And that had a psychic subplot as well. However, it also featured these giant mannequins, and as it turns out, these mannequins were actually people. So it kind of rips off House of Wax a little bit. I know I'm getting off topic here, however, I'm going to come back to it, and it makes sense. These transporting the souls of Toulon and Carolyn into dolls, later to become Camille going into the female doll. They look like something that came from the movie Tourist Trap, which I think was actually a really, really cool idea on Charles Band's part. I don't know how much input he had into it as far as that goes, but I think it was a really cool, almost reference or homage to Tourist Trap. And that was just a really awesome thing that they did. This is another case where I think the sequel and even the first Puppet Master film, they're probably better than what they deserve to be, if that says anything. It's one that if you have seen the original Puppet Master film, I would definitely recommend checking out the second one. I would also recommend checking out the third one, however, I'm going to be talking about that in the next night's episode. But definitely give it a shot. It's, again, a direct-to-video feature, so you're going to know what you're getting with that, but with the right mindset, it's definitely a good movie. And with that, I think I'm going to end this episode. Please go and hit me up on Twitter. As a reminder, you can find me at Adam_FBGM. Also, you guys have heard this many nights. Check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. We just did our Halloween episode, and I think you guys are going to love it. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 25 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. You just can't keep a good franchise down, or even a direct-to-video franchise. This is 3 films in 3 years. This is director David D. Cotio's 1991 Puppet Master 3. Shot with a slightly higher budget than Puppet Master 2, Puppet Master 3 tells the story of Andre Toulon back in World War II times before he immigrated to the United States. So the movie takes place in Nazi Germany. It's a revenge tale of sorts, with the Nazis killing Andre Toulon's wife, Elsa. The reason the Nazis kill Elsa is because they want Andre Toulon's secret to his reanimating, or even just simply animating, the puppets. It probably didn't help that he was putting on shows that was mocking Hitler, so of course the Nazis would not take too kindly to that. We are treated a little bit to some more backstory as far as the animating the inanimate objects, and we also get a new puppet in the puppet 6-shooter, which is a cowboy with 6 arms. Considering this is a really, really cool puppet, I wonder where in the world he was at in Puppet Master 1 and 2. Maybe it's explained in Puppet Master 4. I don't know because I've never really watched Puppet Master 4 all the way through. I thought that one was where the series started to really go downhill and tank. But we are here to talk about Puppet Master 3, and I honestly think this may be the best one of the bunch. This one is where it's not really horror, but it's worked well into the Nazi Germany story, as well as the death of his wife, Elsa. The movie certainly looks better than what it has any right to look. It doesn't look extremely low budget, but if we're going to take that in consideration, this is $800,000 back in 1991 time, so it's a little bit different. This is probably a fairly substantial budget for a direct-to-video film. Puppetry on display here, again, looks great. It's something that never looked cheap in these 3 films. When we got into the later entries, the puppets still looked good. However, some things such as the demon in Puppet Master 4 and 5 looked really, really bad. But here it's easy to say that everything looks pretty good for what it is. It's one that, again, I think it's an entry that is very solid for a direct-to-video film. We have a whole bunch of different things going on, but we definitely have a more streamlined story as opposed to what was presented in the first Puppet Master film and the second one. I also really, really like the fact that Andre Toulon, he was the villain in the last entry. He was not really a terrible person. He was just somebody that was longing for his wife. Here, we actually have him as the hero and somebody that we can sympathize with. He is somebody that lost everything, and, we really want to see those Nazis get what they have coming to them. It's always fun to see in a movie to actually see Nazis get what they deserve, basically. Here it's even more fun because we have puppets carrying out the orders. 6-shooter, he shoots up one of the guys, and yeah, it looks good. The only thing that is really disappointing is the fact that there is, I would say, probably absolutely zero horror aspects to this. This is 100% a revenge-driven story. This is also where the series changed a little bit. The puppets wound up becoming more or less the good guys in number 4 and 5, from what I remember about them and the little bit that I've seen of them. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just the fact that it changed the series from being sort of a fun horror film that I would say would be in the vein of kind of like a Child's Play 2 or 3 as far as being able to have fun with it with next to no scares. But yes, we're not getting any kind of scares here, so if you're looking for a horror film, it's probably not one that you would want to seek out. However, I think you should seek it out and watch it with an open mind, and you'll probably come away impressed by it. Acting across the board is good in the movie. Again, good for a direct-to-video film. Guy Rolfe as Andre Toulon. He is really good in the role. You also have Ian Abercrombie as a scientist in the movie. He's good in the screen time that he gets. He was also in a couple other things. He has a pretty substantial filmography. One of the things I knew him from was Army of Darkness, and then also he is in David Lynch's Inland Empire. So, not too bad. We also have Sarah Douglas as Elsa. She actually played Elsa in Puppet Master 2, and also you may know her from Superman 1 and 2, where she played Ursa. Not only that, she was also in Return of the Living Dead Part 3. So she is a pretty well seasoned veteran actress as far as some bigger budget films as well as some lower budget films, and she does a good job as Elsa in this movie and in Puppet Master 2, honestly. So this is where I said that I consider the Puppet Master films 1 through 3 to be more or less a trilogy. It kind of goes off in a completely different direction in number 4. So outside of talking about Puppet Master, the Littlest Reich, which actually just came out probably about a month or two ago, I'm going to be talking about that one next, and it's kind of an interesting change compared to the other Puppet Master films. But other than that, that's actually going to round out my Puppet Master series rundown. I know it's not a complete series rundown, but I did what I consider to be the trilogy, and I think a lot of other people consider it to be that way as well. And with that, I'm going to close out this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. We just did our Halloween episode. I know I've been talking about that on here quite a bit. And, it was a lot of fun. And, yeah, if you're listening to this, you're going to love that episode that we have in store for you. It just actually dropped today. So give that a listen as well. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 26 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Thomas Lennon and Jenny Pellicer, this is director Sonny Laguna and Tommy Wickland's grindhouse-styled and often trashy reboot and reinvention of the Puppet Master series. This is 2018's Puppet Master, the Littlest Reich. Recently divorced Edgar tries to sell his puppet at a convention, and it just so happens that it's, I believe, the 30th anniversary of the Toulon murders. And that's right, you heard it, Toulon murders. He wasn't exactly 100% a villain in the original series, and he is a full-on villain and also a Nazi here, which means the puppets themselves are Nazi puppets. So that is going to be a tough pill to swallow for Puppet Master fans. I, for one, was not happy with this change. As soon as I found that out, it honestly kind of ticked me off. The movie opens up in 1988, or 87, I forget which, but it opens up in the 80s, and you find that he's trying to pick up women in a bar at the very start of the movie. This time, Andre Toulon is played by Udo Kier. That guy is kind of on the creepy-looking side as it is. He was also in a whole bunch of other things, such as Suspiria, which I have done a 31 Nights of Frights on quite a few days back. He was also in Blade. He was in Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem. He was in a whole bunch of different things. If you watched any movie, you probably have seen Udo Kier in a film role of some sort. But back to the movie, his portrayal of Andre Toulon, as written, is a Nazi. So basically he does not like the lesbians that he tried to pick up at the bar. And sure enough, they meet their demise a little while later at the hands of some puppets. So the movie wastes no time in trying to be somewhat offensive, as well as letting the blood fly. And that is one of the big points that I want to get at. The movie itself, if you are offended easily, you may not want to check out this movie. Also, if you are a fan of the original series, you might dig it, but you might not, just based on the changes alone here. These puppets throughout the movie are essentially committing hate crimes. Pretty much anybody that is not white in the movie or straight, well, they're probably going to die. I get that it's trying to make a statement on the current climate that we live in. And maybe in that respect, as far as being satire a little bit, I guess it succeeds. But yeah, just know that it could wind up offending you potentially. But the movie itself, it looks cheap. I don't know if that was by design. I would assume that this is a bigger budget than what the other Puppet Master films have had. However, it looks really, really cheap. And I guess it's kind of going with the whole kind of grindhouse vibe here. I don't know. It was all right. I've seen it once. I don't know if I will ever watch it again. Some of the comedy works. One of the characters that I really liked was an actor I've never seen in any movie before. And his name is Skeeta Jenkins. He played the character of Cuddly Bear. And he's probably one of the most entertaining aspects of the movie. Thomas Lennon, you probably know him from Reno 911. He's been in a whole bunch of other things as well. He kind of plays like the straight man here. He's not really doing anything funny. He's kind of a wuss in a way, and he winds up becoming a little bit of a hero by the end of it. So it's kind of a good arc, I guess. But yeah, I would say that Skeeta Jenkins, Cuddly Bear, he was probably my favorite character in the movie. He was just awesome in it, flat out. Blood and gore effects look pretty good here. They're obviously done on the cheap. I think they're intentionally done to make look. But that is something I want to get into too. I'm not really sure if I enjoyed the redesigns of the puppets. I would say the Blade puppet. I don't like that he has more of a skull-looking face. And then also the puppets themselves, they're not really as articulate or have as much personality as the puppets in the original. It's one of those things that I don't know how the puppets can look this, like they look reasonably good. And the walking around, they look pretty good. However, you get, like I said, less personality. Their mouths don't even move themselves. So that design, I don't know. It was something that I don't think was a good idea. They really messed with the articulation. They messed with their personalities. And now they're just kind of faceless killers. One awesome thing about the movie, though, this was produced by Fangoria. As a kid, I was a big fan of Fangoria. It was one of those magazines when I was a kid. I always looked forward to checking it out and looking at some of the new horror movies coming up. Of course, now we have the internet. That magazine is essentially making a comeback. I know that they are offering it again. It's by mail only. But it was nice to see the name again. So one of the things about this movie, it was produced by Fangoria Films. However, Full Moon didn't really have an involvement in this. Full Moon owner Charles Band is executive producer of this. He did sell the rights to whichever company was actually behind this. And I think it shows that it's definitely not a Full Moon product. I'm not saying that Full Moon really has a lot of great films. However, it's very obvious that this is a different team behind the whole thing. I do believe we got an additional new puppet. I know we had a snake. I don't know his actual name. That puppet was pretty neat as a whole. But yes, I gotta say the story bugged me. The puppets kind of bugged me. There's nothing terribly wrong with the movie. It's just, it drags too. When you think the movie's over, it keeps going and going. There is one thing that was pretty neat though, and that was they amped up an occult feel to the film. Again, it was actually nice to see some of the cameos. The one that stuck out the most for me was Barbara Crampton, again from the original Puppet Master film. She kind of had a cameo, and she was in Reanimator. She shows up here as a police officer, so it was just cool to see her here in this movie. But is the movie worth a watch? Sure, if you don't get offended easily, and if you want something that has kind of that trashy vibe, this movie definitely has it. I don't know if I dug the movie. Like I said, I watched it once. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I wound up buying it off of Amazon streaming for 99 cents, and I think that's probably about the appropriate price. Give it a shot, I guess, if you're looking for, I don't know, something a little bit on the different side. You may wind up liking it, may not, I don't know. But with that, I'm going to end tonight's episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also give a listen to our podcast and our honest opinion. We just got done making our Halloween episode, and it was posted yesterday, and I think you guys are really going to have a good time. We had a good time recording it. Good night. Hello and welcome to night number 27 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Dale Midkiff, Fred Gwynne, and Denise Crosby, this is Mary Lambert's 1989, fairly well received by fans adaptation of the Stephen King story of the same name, Pet Sematary. The Creed family moves to a small town, and their house is right aside of a major road where trucks actually go through constantly. That'll be a plot point later on. But Lewis Creed meets up with his new neighbor, Judd Crandall, and Judd Crandall tells him a story about how behind his house there is a Micmac Indian burial ground, and about, well, sometimes dead is better. And that's pretty much all you need to know here as far as the plot. The Pet Sematary itself is the major, I would say, plot driver throughout this film. This movie is notable for a couple different things. One of them is the sister Zelda. She's actually played by a man in the movie, and a lot of people kind of put this up with the Pennywise from the 1990 It adaptation, where it just generally creeped them out. And also the fact that this movie, it fits in with the creepy kid genre of horror films. The character of Gage, played by Micah Hughes, he's definitely creepy. It's kind of funny. In later shots, you can tell that it's a doll. But for the most part, it's done fairly well throughout the movie. So I left the plot vague. Yes, this is an old movie. If you haven't seen it, I don't want to ruin too much throughout, so I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. And mostly just talk about some of the things I liked about the movie. For one, I really like the casting of this film. You have Dale Midkiff as Lewis Creed, and I think he does a good job here. He provides some good emotional weight, especially to some of the middle and later scenes of the film. He does a good job with what's presented here. And then you have Fred Gwynne. That's right. If you don't know the name, you'll probably recognize the voice a little bit and recognize the face. This is actually the same guy that played Herman Munster in the original Munsters TV show. That's actually a personal favorite of mine. That show was ridiculous, but getting back to his role in this movie, Fred Gwynne, I mean, he does a great job here. He's always drinking a beer and always has a story to tell. And he's so good in the role that, you know, it almost makes you wish that you knew somebody like that and you could just sit down, have a beer, and talk about some of the history or some of his story. He's really good in the role, and he's probably one of my favorites here. One thing that this movie, I think, gets right is the fact that they actually had Stephen King write the screenplay. And I think that's really cool, because Stephen King adaptations, yes, I understand he took some liberties with his own source material here, but Stephen King has never taken too kindly to a lot of his film adaptations of his novels before, and here we have him actually going and, you know, making the movie that he would want to see, I guess, from his novel. And I think that's actually really great that they did that. Stephen King cameo. He cameos in a lot of his films. He cameos here as the minister. And I think it's pretty awesome. I always like trying to see Stephen King in some of the older Stephen King adaptations. It's always fun to see. I think director Mary Lambert, she does a good job with a lot of the scenes. I think some of the performances are off with the direction in this. However, being from 1989, I think we can sort of let that slide. It's one of those things that the movie is kind of representative of its time with the direction and action. With that in mind, I don't think it'll bother too many people. I think Mary Lambert did a good job here of providing some emotional weight with the way some of the scenes are intercut with other scenes, and I think that's also a true testament to how good Stephen King can be in both his novels as well as some of his film adaptations. Not only are they, you know, scary or have a definite creep factor to them, they have a definite heart. And this movie deals with the loss of a child, and I think we can all put ourselves in that position. I don't have children myself, but I could imagine that if I lost my child, I could imagine how bad the grief would be. And I think Dale Midkiff does a really good job here. Also, I don't know if anybody is a fan of the show Time Tracks, but yes, Dale Midkiff was actually the cop sent back from the future to track down the criminals that went back to the past in Time Tracks. So I almost forgot about that one. I just wanted to throw that out. It's cool to see him in a movie here. But getting back to that plot of losing a child, I believe that Stephen King wrote it as a what if he lost one of his own children? And I think that whole idea is carried out well here. I mean, the whole plot of people and pets coming back after 3 days of being buried in the pet cemetery, or the Indian burial ground behind the pet cemetery. Yeah, I think a lot of people, if they knew that they would have some sort of power like that, I think they would probably do the same thing. So it's definitely something that we can sympathize with the character of Lewis here. One of the more surprising things about this movie is it doesn't shy away from the gore or the violence, really. I mean, it's not over the top. I would just not expect a lot of the gore that's in the movie. The character of Victor Pascal, played by Brad Greenquist, that right there, I mean, his brains are pretty much out of his head the entire movie. So, I mean, it's definitely not nice to look at, but it looks good here. And I think this is a fairly successful adaptation by everybody involved. I like the fact that producer Richard P. Rubenstein and Mitchell Galen are here for their producing roles, because I was a big fan of the show Monsters back in the day, as well as Tales from the Dark Side, the TV show. I think a lot of the small TV level talent mixed with a big budget, or even not necessarily big budget, but small to medium budget film here works really well. This also has a remake coming out by the same guys that did Starry Eyes, coming out next year. I'm a little worried about that one. The trailer looks all right for it, but I think it's going to be hard for me to get beyond the casting. As I said, I really like Dale Midkiff and Fred Gwynne here. And then in the new one, for example, we're going to have John Lithgow and Fred Gwynne's character. And I don't know if, just judging by the trailer, if it's a good fit or not, but I guess we'll have to see on that. Because there's a remake coming out of Pet Sematary is the reason that I decided to tackle this one here. But with that, I think I'm going to end this episode. So remember, sometimes dead is better. And also, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast and our fantastic Halloween episode. That was a blast compiling for you guys. And if you don't know it by now, our podcast is In Our Honest Opinion. So yes, definitely give a listen to that. Hope you guys enjoy it. And good night. Hello and welcome to night number 28 of 31 Nights of Frights, presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring Noah Hathaway, June Lockhart, Michael Moriarty, and a cameo appearance by Sonny Bono, this is John Carl Buechler's 1986 film that is not often talked about compared to its sequel, which was a name-only sequel. That's right, this is Troll. Troll starts with the Potter family moving into a hotel complex, and it just so happens that there is a troll lurking around. This troll's name is Turok, and his former queen, played by June Lockhart, she kind of keeps him at bay. He just kind of lurks around in the laundry room of the hotel or apartment complex. He puts a spell on young Wendy and is running around as an imposter Wendy, and he goes and tries to regain his kingdom, with Wendy being his new queen. So this is a movie that I've talked about movies here that haven't really freaked me out as a kid or anything like that. This is actually one that really freaked me out when I was a kid. Turok, the troll, he actually goes and he has a little ring, and then he goes and pokes people with this ring, and that's where they have like an allergic reaction, and then all of a sudden turn into a green pod thing and burst open with vines and trolls coming out of this pod thing. The first one in the movie for this to happen to was Sonny Bono. And I gotta say, Sonny Bono is actually really funny here as a complete scumbag. He plays a womanizing dirtball, and it's pretty hilarious, the stuff that he says. Obviously, the movie's not very PC for its time, but it's pretty funny, some of the stuff he said. And plus, it's Sonny Bono. I mean, I can't take it seriously. Everything here in the movie looks great, in my opinion. It's a somewhat low-budget-ish film for its time. This is one of Charles Band's Empire Pictures. So if you haven't noticed, Charles Band, he was a bit of a super producer back in the 80s and 70s, and that's where he went off and did his own Full Moon thing. But yes, he was a part of Empire Pictures, and I think his influence definitely carried over to other films such as Ghoulies and such. Some of the trolls are the exact same ones that were in Ghoulies, and you're not going to confuse them for anything other than puppets or anything like that, but they're suitably rubbery and gooey looking. They always look very sweaty to me, so they're just little nasty creations in my opinion. This movie also has in Phil Fondacaro, Phil Fondacaro, if you don't know him, he's the tiny guy in a lot of 80s films. Like, he has been in a ton of different things. And I think he plays kind of a dual role here. He plays Malcolm, and then he also plays Turok the Troll. I think he does a good job with both. Whenever somebody is in kind of a rubber suit, it's a possible loss of any kind of, I guess, acting ability, and I think he plays the role here pretty well. He plays him as kind of sinister, somewhat cutesy in a way, I guess, but then also, Turok winds up saving the day by the end of the movie. This is also a cool movie too. I like the fact that June Lockhart is in it, being a kid of the 80s and 90s. The original Lassie TV show was on Nickelodeon, and I used to watch that when I was a kid and growing up. And it was cool to see June Lockhart here in something completely different, because she's the badass witch queen here, and she has lived since the 16th century, I believe, is when it was supposed to be. She takes young Harry Potter. Yes, Harry Potter. We'll get to that later. She takes him under her wing, and he actually helps save the day as well against Turok the Troll. I actually like the fact too that they have June Lockhart's daughter, Anne Lockhart, play the same character but a younger version. It's a very cool effect when June Lockhart takes down her hair and then she turns into a younger version of herself. It's pretty awesome that her daughter looks so much like her, and that it works really well here. So as far as any other acting in the movie or any other actors that you may know, this is one of Julia Louis-Dreyfus's first films. Turok the Troll kind of turns her into a nymph kind of character, like a fairy type of character. And it's actually kind of cool to see her here, in the pre-Seinfeld and pre-Veep days. So the brother to Wendy, the one that got put under a spell and is currently as Turok prancing around, that is played by Noah Hathaway, and his name is Harry Potter Jr. J.K. Rowling actually confirmed in an interview that she got the idea for Harry Potter from the movie Troll. She just kind of worked it into something her own, but it definitely gave her inspiration. So I think that would be reason enough to check this movie out. One other thing on it, this is one of the few decent movies by John Carl Buechler. He is traditionally a special effects guy, and he did the effects on Ghoulies. He did direct Ghoulies 3, which is not a good movie by any means. And then he also did Friday the 13th Part 7. His direction here is kind of stock, but the effects look so good, I believe, because of him having a background in special effects. Like I said again, everything is suitably rubbery looking. It looks realistic, yet it doesn't. And then you even have some stop motion effects with the vines, and everything's carried out really well. And I know if you check out the trailer, they kind of market this movie as a family horror film, and I guess that could be appropriate or suitable. It's not really. It could wind up scaring the kids a little bit. It did me when I was a kid. Now it doesn't bother me. Obviously, I know it's fake, but yes, some of the stuff in the movie used to creep me out, such as the trolls singing. The trolls singing used to freak me out. It sounds, I don't know, just by the way they sound almost like metal singers or something. I don't know. Just something that freaked me out when I was a kid. I would say definitely check this one out if you haven't. It is kind of a fun horror film. It doesn't exactly entirely fit into horror because it does have that fantasy aspect, I think they were probably going for a Labyrinth type of feel, but obviously Labyrinth would be a far superior film. But yeah, this one here, definitely worth your time. And with that, I'm going to close out this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. We did our Halloween episode. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about the podcast and our Halloween episode, but seriously, it's awesome, guys. And we do even talk about Troll a little bit there. But with that, good night. Hello and welcome to night number 29 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring George Hardy and Michael Paul Stevenson, this is Claudio Fragrasso's name-only troll sequel that actually does not involve any trolls, the 1990 cinematic masterpiece, Troll 2. The Waits family is doing a timeshare, going on vacation to a place called Nilbog, which is actually goblin spelled backwards. That's a huge plot point later in the film. They find that Nilbog is a haven and an entire small town full of goblins. That's right, they're goblins. They're not trolls. This movie is titled Troll 2, but yet there's nothing but goblins. There's a whole bunch of other crazy things that happen. The young child in the movie, Joshua, he gets visited by his grandfather who is dead, so his spirit visits him. He gives Joshua some Molotov cocktails to take on the trolls. He helps Joshua defeat them with a double-decker bologna sandwich. This movie is pure ridiculous, but that doesn't mean it's not fun. Alright, so I actually do have a little bit of a fond memory. I remember renting this film back in the day from West Coast Video in Pennsylvania, and it's one of those movies that it's a bad movie. It's a super bad movie. I even knew that as a kid. And I remember my mom said to me about it, she said, they're obviously not professional actors. And she was right. Every single one of the people in here are basically small local actors. And George Hardy, who plays the father in the movie, he actually had some big aspirations of actually becoming a star. And he sort of did become a star later in life when this movie sort of became infamous. It slowly grew a cult following over the years, and I mean, good for him. There's an excellent documentary on this film, and it's called Best Worst Movie, and I highly recommend watching Troll 2 and then checking out Best Worst Movie, which is a documentary directed by Michael Paul Stevenson, who played Joshua in Troll 2. He revisits some of the actors and such in the movie, and honestly, it's a little sad as far as what happened to some of them. So since there's already a fairly amazing documentary on the movie, what can I really say about this other than I actually really enjoy this movie just because it's funny. I mean, it's bad, but as far as being a bad movie, it's completely watchable. It's pretty inept with its filmmaking, but that's one of the reasons of why it's so funny. No, the movie's not intentionally funny, and I think that's one of the reasons why it works. Granted, it's unintentional that it works, but the whole thing works. The special effects in the movie are terrible. The trolls are obviously just people in suits and masks. They do not really have very much articulation in the face. So when when they're eating one of their victims, somewhat towards the middle of the movie, they're just rubbing it all over the masks, and it's pretty hilarious. The goop that they are smearing all over their face is a green stuff that looks kind of like Jell-O to me. I don't know, everything in this movie, everything in the town except for like the milk, if you go to eat it, it has green on it of some sort, and I don't know who in their right mind would actually be like, oh yes, that's normal for all the food in the town to have green on it. Yeah, there's no way I would eat that. And also, the family themselves, they don't seek out any actual food. Instead, I think it's supposed to be over the course of like 2 or 3 days, and at this point nobody has eaten anything, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. But then again, let's keep in mind that this movie, it's a ridiculous bad movie, so you can't apply too much logic into the movie. The family could have gotten away multiple times throughout. I just don't understand the movie itself and some of the choices that the director made. But you know what? It works in our favor because it makes it hilarious to watch. Obviously, the original Troll film is going to be a far, far, far superior film, and that movie had some crazy stuff going on. This one here, it's a name-only sequel. I don't know how in the world they got their hands on the rights or whatnot for this one to be made, but yes, the first one is definitely head and shoulders above this one. And I'm gonna say that the first one, even though I like it, I mean, it's not an actual good movie. Like, you're not going to watch it and say, well, you know what, this is up there with something like Titanic as far as being a great film. But it's well made, and it told a pretty good story in my opinion. This one here, we get a story that is that's all over the place. There's a whole bunch of scenes that don't make sense, which I already covered. Even still, there's like an erotic popcorn eating scene. It's the least unerotic film or scene in any film that I've probably ever seen. And it is truly hilarious. So no more popcorn. So if you're looking for something that's often ridiculous, I would probably recommend checking this one out. If it's better as a comedy, of course, all the comedy is awkward and unintentional, just based off of the talent involved. But yeah, I would say give it a shot. But make sure you follow it up with Best Worst Movie, because Best Worst Movie is an actual good movie that came out of a bad movie. And it's funny how that works. It's well known that Ed Wood made a lot of bad movies. However, the Ed Wood movie from Tim Burton is an actual good movie. So sometimes bad movies, bad directors can actually spawn some pretty good movies in their own right. So with that being said, definitely check those out as a double feature. You may not want to watch this one right after Troll. And that's just because you're going from a fairly decent movie to a really bad movie, and you might be in the wrong mindset to check out Troll 2. But yes, Troll 2, Best Worst Movie, do that as a double feature, and I think that would probably be not a bad way to spend a night. But with that, I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. Check out that Halloween episode. We also have another episode coming up for you guys this week. So definitely give a listen to that. And good night. Hello and welcome to night number 30 of 31 Nights of Frights presented by In Our Honest Opinion. My name is Adam and I'll be your host. Starring far too many people that you've seen in other things before, but the ones that get top billing here would probably be Brian Cox and Anna Paquin. This is Michael Dougherty's 2007 cult favorite anthology film, Trick or Treat. So Trick or Treat is an anthology film that has 5 interlocking horror stories that all take place on the same Halloween night. In this, we get tales of a principal that is a serial killer. You have a tale of vampires and werewolves, and then you also have mean teenagers pulling a trick, and you have one of my favorite stories in it, and that's the one involving Sam. So I kind of glossed over that a little bit as far as the plot. Yes, the stories interlock. It's kind of more fun to see them on your own, so I didn't want to get into that too much. This is one that I would definitely recommend to anybody that likes something sort of in the Tales from the Crypt, Creepshow kind of vibe. This definitely has it. It is a much better movie than, say, the movie Creepshow 3, which was not even made with George Romero's blessing. That's another story for another podcast, probably next year. But this definitely has that Tales from the Crypt and Creepshow style vibe. It works out well for the movie. Michael Dougherty crafted a movie that feels like a pure Halloween film here. I think it's probably one of the more perfect anthology films to put on for Halloween. Of course, we have had other Halloween anthology films that came after, such as one I caught on Netflix called Tales of Halloween. That is not very good. I was hoping for a little bit of a Trick or Treat style film, but we didn't get that with that movie. Here, everything feels right. This is a movie that, sadly, back in the day, Warner Brothers had this all set for release, and then they went and they didn't know what to do with it. It's an anthology film. Anthology films traditionally have not done well in the box office, and you have this that got sent to direct-to-video under Warner Brothers WB Premiere. Sadly, I mean, this movie is high quality. I mean, if you want to put it as a direct-to-video film, sure, go ahead. But this is a movie that was meant to be theatrical. I don't know of anywhere where it was ever playing in a theater. I know it did make the rounds a little bit. Sadly, I never got a chance to see it in the theater, but it's well worth checking out on DVD or Blu-ray. Everything here is with a sense of fun, and I like it that it sort of embraces a lot of the Halloween, like, I don't want to call them stereotypes, but more Halloween traditions, and it does it extremely well. Everything here presented is well written. I think for what it is, it's well acted. Michael Dougherty, at this point, the only thing that he really did was he worked with Bryan Singer on Superman Returns. He wrote that. Bryan Singer is actually here in producer capacity, and this is Michael Dougherty's first film that he wrote and directed, and he did a great job. The stories interlock near perfectly. And not only that, I think the fact that he included vampires and werewolves and zombies, and then even a little demonic guy in Sam, I mean, it's a really cool idea, and it was a well thought out idea. I know Michael Dougherty did say that there's going to be a sequel on the horizon. I kind of don't want to see a sequel because I worry that we're not going to get a good movie. I could be wrong, and if he has another idea, then sure. I would guess he'd probably knock it out of the park, but I can't help but think this movie is perfect the way it is, even though I would like to see further adventures with Sam. So I keep mentioning Sam. Sam is this little kid, sized person. He's got a jack-o'-lantern for a head, and I think his story with harassing Brian Cox's character, I think, is probably one of the most fun parts of the entire film. Again, I don't want to get into too much of the plot because it's kind of fun just going into this and watching it without knowing a whole lot about it other than it being an anthology film. I've only tackled 2 other anthology films during this podcast, and this is definitely one of the stronger ones that I've seen. This is one of my favorite anthologies, so this goes down with Tales from the Hood 1, not the second one. This goes down with Twilight Zone the movie, Creepshow, as I mentioned before. It's just a really well done anthology film. So with that, I feel that this is kind of a love letter to the anthology films of old from the 70s and 80s. And it's one of the things that I kind of miss. We don't see them too often nowadays. As it stands now, this movie is 11 years old. And I really enjoy the anthology style as far as movies and TV shows. Is probably one of the reasons of why I actually, personally, I enjoy short stories. I like the short stories of Stephen King. I feel like the short story, if it's done well, it's almost perfect in its execution. But I also like the Twilight Zone a lot. I think that show is perfect in its execution. And so we get a little bit of that here. I'm not saying that this rivals anything in the Twilight Zone or anything like that, because they're completely different. But this here, it does it with, I don't know, I get the sense that they had fun making this movie. Throughout the entire movie, I get the feeling that they just kind of made it with an extreme goodwill and a love for Halloween itself. And I think that's a perfect movie here to have for night number 30. This is also an anthology movie that I've seen multiple times, and it's never let me down. It's one of those that I could probably watch, every year, make it a little bit of a tradition, and be perfectly fine with that. It's that good. So if you have not seen this movie, definitely go and check it out. It really is a blast from start to finish, and it kind of gave me a big smile the first time I saw it, and every time after that. And with that, I'm going to close out tonight's episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, this is the part where I usually promote the podcast. And yes, I'm going to be doing that. However, we have a special surprise in store for you guys. We would like to, as a special thanks for listening to 31 Nights of Frights, we're going to run a little contest for you listeners. So how it's going to work is there's going to be 2 code words, and the first is actually going to be on this episode. So the first code word is ghostly. The second code word is going to be revealed at the beginning of the bumper on their compilation episode, where we're going to be compiling the last week's episodes into one nice big episode for you guys. So we'll actually at the very beginning of that, we're going to reveal the second word. And so all you'll have to do is go to our Instagram. There will be a post, and all you have to do is be the first one to post the 2 code words on that Instagram post, and you can get yourself a pretty awesome 31 Nights of Frights t-shirt. So again, one more time, that word is ghostly. So also keep an eye out for the last night of our 31 Nights of Frights. I think you guys will enjoy what I have to say on the last episode, and then give a listen to In Our Honest Opinion. Got that Halloween episode, and we have that compilation episode coming up. That compilation episode is going to have that second code word, so make sure you keep an ear out for that one. All right, with that, good night. Hello and welcome to night number 31 of 31 Nights of Frights, presented by In Our Honest Opinion. That's right, we made it through 30 episodes. Number 31 is right here. So, happy Halloween, everyone, and hope everyone stays safe out there tonight. If you don't know it by now, my name is Adam, and I'll be your host. Also, one more thing before I get into revealing the episode tonight for night 31. I will be revealing at the end of the episode, I will be saying the first code word for our contest. I'll be saying that again at the very end of this episode, so keep an ear out for that. So, how about we end this one where we started? Starring Jamie Lee Curtis and written by David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, directed by David Gordon Green, with a score by John Carpenter. This is Halloween. So forget everything you knew before. Do not remember any of the sequels. And this here is, there's only 2 Halloween movies in existence. You have the first one from 1978, and then you also have this one here from 2018. So this is Halloween 40 years later. Jamie Lee Curtis returns to the role that made her famous as Laurie Strode, and in the movie you find out she has a little bit of PTSD. That did not stop her from starting a family, having failed marriages, and having a daughter and a granddaughter. So, she has waited 40 years for her revenge against Michael Myers. She witnessed, I believe, 3 deaths in the first Halloween film. So, we have to say, all right, that can definitely damage somebody. But as it turns out, I said she had a little PTSD. No, she has a lot PTSD. She has a panic room in her house. She has all kinds of guns and a shooting range on her property. So it's, she definitely has PTSD pretty bad. So getting back to the plot, as it turns out, it seems the state is going to stop providing funding for Michael Myers to be in psychiatric care, and they are transferring him to, I believe, a prison or maximum security facility. And, well, he escapes. So, it's a good movie. I'm going to flat out say that. But if there's one complaint, and I want to get that off my chest right away, is that everything seems too familiar throughout the whole thing. Some of the kills and deaths in the movie itself, I don't know, been there, done that before. However, some of the new kills are pretty brutal. The body count is definitely higher, and there is a little bit more blood and gore throughout. My other big complaint, so I said I have one complaint, I have 2 complaints. My only other complaint here is the fact that it's hard for me to believe that she did not get, I guess, better help, and that this took basically her entire life, and she's been gearing up for this moment. So I think the believability is a little off here. However, we're looking at a slasher horror film. But with those off my chest, I'm going to say that this was actually a pretty good movie, and I think it's quite possibly the best sequel that you could have hoped to have to John Carpenter's original. I think it helped having Carpenter steer the ship a little bit with McBride and David Gordon Green. I really think that Carpenter's guidance helped us along. You will not confuse this for 1 minute for a John Carpenter film or even John Carpenter's original. There's so many nice little nods to the original Halloween film as well as its sequels that I think it's a really good sequel and follow-up to the original Halloween. I think it's more successful than Halloween H2O. Halloween H2O is okay, but that one kind of suffers from being a movie of its time. There's little self-referential types of jokes throughout. And not only that, H2O kind of cheated us by the end of it. This one here, definitely, if I want to get into the ending a little bit, I'm not going to say exactly what happened. But it could be taken as a finality, or it could actually be taken as left open. So everything about this movie has definite goodwill. By goodwill, I mean it shows a definite love of the actual source material. This is kind of a lovingly crafted movie, and it's good to see David Gordon Green and Danny McBride step out of their comfort zone of comedy. This does have some comedy in it. It did make me chuckle at some of the stuff, but you can definitely pick out their little touches on dialogue, which honestly is not a bad thing. It lightens things up a little bit. I do think the family aspect, as far as Laurie Strode and her family, I think that is played out pretty good here. I don't know if they're given enough screen time, though, as far as Judy Greer, and I cannot for the life of me think of the name of the daughter, but I don't think that they were given really enough to make us care as much as what we should have. But the family aspect, I think, was actually done fairly well. So characters I did not care for. I did not care for the podcasters, even though I realized they're kind of a catalyst to help the plot along. I really did not like them. Also, we have a new Dr. Loomis. His name is not Loomis, but he more or less is Dr. Loomis. There is a little bit of a twist throughout involving his character, and I really did not care for that one bit. It just honestly did not make much sense to me. I think acting across the board and direction is solid. I really thought Jamie Lee Curtis, she did a good job with her PTSD, Laurie Strode. And also, I really, really liked seeing the Silver Shamrock masks from Halloween 3, which I know was a flop, but now has gotten to be kind of a cult status style movie, and it definitely deserves it. That's just, everybody knows Halloween 3 as the one without Michael Myers. Sure, that's exactly what it is. However, it's actually a really entertaining movie in its own right. So it was great to see the masks here again. So I know it sounds like I had quite a bit of negatives to say. No, this is actually a good movie. It's a good sequel. It's a good Halloween sequel. It's kind of nice because you can pick your own timeline. I believe there is 3 timelines now for the Halloween series. I guess it might even be 4 if you consider the Rob Zombie movies to be a separate timeline. I don't really consider those to be a part of the series. That's a remake and a sequel to the remake. So it's kind of a cool idea. It's nice that we live in an age where we can actually have retcon sequels. And it's even funny to see how Halloween 18 starts up. It actually starts up with the pumpkin in a very similar fashion of the first Halloween film. However, this pumpkin, I guess, has been rotten. It's been rotting all of this time, but it kind of inflates, and it kind of made me laugh a little bit. However, I get that. It means that Halloween was dead for basically 40 years, and now it's back with a nice, healthy, fresh pumpkin again. I know that's a silly way to put it, but it was cool but kind of funny at the same time. Overall, I think this one is going to satisfy all the Michael Myers and Halloween fans out there. I thought it was good, and if you have not seen it yet, I recommend probably checking out the first one before you see this one. But go into it and have a great time. I think the wait for a good Halloween film, I think that wait is over. And with that, I'm going to end this episode. As a reminder, you can find me on Twitter at Adam_FBGM. Also, check out our podcast, In Our Honest Opinion. We have our Halloween episode up. We have compilation episodes. There will be a compilation episode of 31 Nights of Frights coming this Thursday. And that is where you will be able to find the other code word for our Instagram contest. We have a contest where you can win a 31 Nights of Frights t-shirt. And that is simply by taking the code words that I'm giving you and putting them on the post. First one to do it wins an awesome shirt. So in case you missed that word on the last episode, that word is ghostly. So remember that word, ghostly. Also, while I have your attention here, I did want to do a little bit of a thanks to everyone for listening over the course of this month. Whether you were listening every day, whether you were listening to the compilation of all of the 31 Nights of Frights when we were compiling a week together, I just want to say thanks to everybody. Also, for the ones that got me into podcasting, Marvin and Will, I'd like to thank them for giving me the opportunity and giving me an outlet for some of my creativity and allowing me to speak about some of the films that I love. Also, got a few more dedications and thank yous, and that would be to the people that got me into horror movies in the first place. My mom and my dad. I mean, they just they knew that they were something that I enjoyed watching, and they let me watch them, and it was actually a lot of fun discovering things for the first time, and then doing this here in rediscovering movies. So be it you, the listeners, be it my In Our Honest Opinion family, my mom, my dad, my girlfriend, I just want to thank everybody for listening, the love, and the support. I had a blast, and hopefully I will be back here next year to give you another 31 Nights of Frights. And with that, happy Halloween, and good night.